When I started this YouTube channel, I had already read the first few issues of Image Comics' Transformers series and fallen in love with it. I'd been a fan of Transformers all my life, but never really of comics per se. The only comics I grew up with were the Lego Bionicle comics, which probably deserve their own video from me at some point in time. But I never was really involved in the comics world. Transformers successfully opened my mind to a new form of entertainment that I had missed out on for the majority of my life at the time, and it did so by its writer and artist, Daniel Warren Johnson. Daniel Warren Johnson, often abbreviated to DWJ, is extremely well known within the Transformers community and the comic book community due to his extremely talented drawing skills as well as his wonderfully written stories. Based in Chicago, Johnson has taken many accolades home, such as 3 Eisner Awards as well as Best Publication for Teens in 2023. He's worked with pretty much every major publisher out there, such as Dark Horse, Image, Marvel, and DC, on many new IPs as well as existing franchise names such as Wonder Woman, Thor, and of course, Transformers. While this video is entirely based on covering Johnson's work, I'd be remiss not to mention Mike Spicer, who has worked as Johnson's colorist ever since 2015's Extremity. If you see Johnson's name on a comic, then chances are Spicer is also along for the ride. This goes as well for Russ Wooten, his letterer, who also often follows him wherever he goes. So as the title of this video mentions, I want to review every single Daniel Warren Johnson comic and speak on his legacy and how his storytelling has affected my life. But you might have noticed the almost in the title, or at least the thumbnail itself. So let's talk about that really quickly. Johnson is a comic book writer, but he's also an artist, meaning that he works on many different comics outside of his own stories. He has drawn hundreds of variant covers for comics that he's not really involved in, and he's even consulted on some other projects. All of this is to say that for this video, we will be covering Johnson's primary works listed here on screen. Notable, the Ghost Fleet, Alabaster, and Jurassic League are missing from this list. I've decided to omit these comics because they are not both written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson, and therefore it felt somewhat unfair to compare them to his other works. Johnson's latest work at the time of this recording, The Moon is Following Us, is co-drawn by artist Riley Rossmo, which might make some of you think it should also be excluded, but this is my video and I make up the arbitrary rules, so no, it's staying in. Lastly, Johnson has a collection of mini comics that he wrote and drew that I will not be covering in this video. If you do want to explore those works of his, then Bunkmaster B has a great video covering them that I've linked down in the description below. So, Bunkmaster B, thank you so much. Alright, enough disclaimers out of the way, let's travel back to 2012 to take a look at Space Mullet. Daniel Warren Johnson released the beginnings of his very own first comic on spacemullet.com, a blog where pages to the story would be uploaded every Monday and Thursday, for the most part. The website is still up, and you can track the story, Daniel Warren Johnson's feelings on his own work, and comments from avid readers at the time. It's important to note that the pages of this comic were released one by one, not as a full issue all in one go. Because of this, Johnson's first comic ever, you can tell he's kind of refining his style and storytelling primarily through his own comments left on each page. He is rather harsh on himself, but then again, what artist is not critical of their own work? There are 8 chapters to Space Mullet in total on the blog, but for this review, we will only be discussing the first 5. At the end of this section of the video, I will speak on the remaining 3 issues that were not reviewed. Space Mullet is an epic sci-fi adventure about a former space marine turned trucker named Jonah and his companion, Alpheus, as they traverse the galaxy trying to make the best of their situations. The team has a colorful array of adventures, including them trying to clear Jonah's name from his past wrongdoings, facing racist space goblins, trying to uncover the mystery of magic alien child, and so much more. The comic actually hits on the idea of the world at large being very close-minded quite often, using Alpheus as a victim of blatant racist-fueled slanders and violent actions, as well as a heartbreaking scene where he is denied life-saving medical service simply because health insurances do not cover his species. It's a constant thread throughout this storyline, as the world is just not accepting as we had hoped it would have been. While we, the reader, look and wonder at all these amazing different aliens and worlds, the world on the page itself sees them as, well, only that. Aliens. Something different. Something to be hated. While the overall storyline between issues is kept up, Space Mullet's individual chapters act more as an anthology in a way. Time jumps and location jumps happen often, showing us that Johnson is not so worried about creating an interconnected world with strict timelines and a story that is beholden to a set path, but rather a cast of characters that we follow as they get into trouble and try their hardest to escape said trouble in one piece. So again, this is Johnson's first foray into comics. But even though these pages are done in black, white, and blue, you can still feel his iconic sense of style and storytelling on these pages. Nothing is too realistic here, but everything is gritty and scratched up. Nothing is new. Everything is used and abused to an extent. Characters themselves are abused emotionally as well, as people are taken advantage of and threatened often to once again show us that this world is not fair in any way. And kind-hearted strangers that do the right thing, they face unfair consequences for their actions. But the comic is not just a dark story that will leave you feeling bad. There are moments of adventure and levity, like in issue 5 when the team has to fight against a horrid monster aboard their spaceship. Where did this monster come from? Something so vile and evil that would destroy the universe itself. Surely it must have crawled out of the depths of hell or slipped its way into this world from another dimension. No, it's actually just all the mold and grime of the unwashed dishes in the ship's kitchen sink. Johnson knows how to be silly and bring the mood back up sometimes. Overall, Space Mullet is a fun, albeit somewhat unbalanced time when reading. It's hard going from the heights of Johnson's work back to this, as I did when I first read it. It is in no way bad or a poor product. It's just that everything he has created after this has improved in every possible way. This comic is the stepping stones towards the amazing stories we now know so well from Daniel Warren Johnson. Because of this, I'm going to place Space Mullet in the B tier of my ranking list here. It is an enjoyable read, and one that I do recommend people check out, but not before any of his other titles. If you want to see where it all started, then this is the comic for you. Now as for chapters 6 through 8. The trade paperback for Space Mullet ends on chapter 5, and originally I was really put off by this, given it's somewhat of a sad ending. I did have to remind myself, though, that this was a webcomic released in small parts, and so there was not some big grand ending in place to bring everything together. Chapter 6 begins a new story about Alpheus' origin and his home world. We even get to see items that Daniel Warren Johnson loves to sneak into his comics, such as the Millennium Falcon, an A-Wing, Wolverine, and of course, Optimus Prime. These remaining chapters are honestly, in my opinion, the best parts of Space Mullet. However, they have been left somewhat unfinished. Johnson leaves the story at a point where more questions are raised than answered, and it's because of this and the fact that the official trade paperback of the series doesn't collect these issues that I'm omitting them from this review. I would highly suggest that you read Space Mullet through the official website, as it really does add a lot to see Daniel Warren Johnson answer people's questions and provide updates as he was writing the story from 2012 to 2017. There's also so much more to learn about Johnson on this website, as he regularly posted updates on behind-the-scenes process of making the series, including an upload of some of the before-mentioned mini-comics. So as 2017 started to close, fewer and fewer updates were being delivered about Space Mullet. But that's because Daniel Warren Johnson had been working on his next new project, Extremity. Extremity is Daniel Warren Johnson's foray into the true darkness. While Space Mullet danced with the ideas of classism and violence, Extremity wrestles in the mud with them. Twisted, bloody, and unforgiving, this comic was marked as having the beauty and imagination of a Studio Ghibli movie set in the world of something akin to Mad Max. Extremity, as its name suggests, is, well, extreme, and it is without a doubt one of the most polarizing stories Johnson has put out to date. Here we begin to see Johnson bring the heart into his comics. He often states now that his pieces of work must have two things, action and heart. And this title brings both, albeit not entirely equally. The world of Extremity and its protagonist, Thea, is a bloody, unforgiving battleground. I mean, just look at the cover art for issue number 1. That's our main character, standing atop a bloody pile of corpses, with her hand freshly sawed off. We follow Thea, an artist who has lost her mother and her dominant hand in battle against her tribe's rival clan. She's a young woman struggling with her own identity as the world she grew up in demands she be a ruthless, killing machine. But all she wants to do is draw and create art. This dream, however, seems out of reach as she struggles to draw after her major injury, and the fact that her father, the leader of their clan, is hell-bent on revenge after the murder of his wife. In this dog-eat-dog world, Thea must also watch over her younger brother, Rollo, who struggles to come to terms with the obscene amount of violence. Thea is no softie, though, as in the premiere issue, she takes revenge on the men responsible for her own mutilation. She returns the favor and sets out on a path of revenge and bloodlust. It's important before we tread further into this comic that I read an excerpt from Daniel Warren Johnson himself, written at the end of issue 1 of this series. It reads, "While working on my previous comic, Space Mullet, I relished in the fact that I could always hide behind the title. Even if dark things happened, I could always pull back the curtain and pretend I wasn't taking it too seriously. This is my first project where I openly reveal my own raw emotions and fears. For better or for worse, I wasn't able to start telling the story well until I made the main character go through my worst nightmare, losing my right hand. My identity as an artist and a creator rests very heavily in that singular extremity. If it is taken away, what is left of me? What is left of Thea?" This springboarded very naturally into a revenge story, with a person looking in all the wrong places for the thing that will make them whole again. I could lie to you and tell you I tried to mask this emotional intensity with monsters and swords and violence. But in reality, that's just window dressing, a way to tell my story in an interesting and captivating way, while delivering something more meaningful. Of course, I love writing and drawing sci-fi tech and action scenes, but it all feels dead if there is no spark behind it. And whether you like this book or not, I do believe it has that spark. Thea speaks to me as I'm writing her, and in some way, her courage gives me strength in my own life. I hope she does the same for you. Johnson has opened his heart and soul to us in this title, and it shows. If Space Mullet acted as the stepping stones to the creator we know now, then Extremity is the first step in a path of amazing stories about growth and family. Thea, Rollo, and their father Jerome all journey through a metaphorical hell together as they try to find their place in the world. Thea, as mentioned before, struggles to understand what her place is, as she was named an artist as a young child in her clan. Rollo denies the need for senseless violence, and yet befriends an ancient robot who is designed for just that, senseless violence. And Jerome, often referred to as Abba, an Aramaic word for father, is just that, a father figure to his children but also his entire clan, struggles with letting go of his own hatred and bloodlust for those who are different than him. Thea is still the main protagonist of this story, as she ventures out from home and even has to work alongside the daughter of her father's arch-nemesis to survive this harsh world of the floating plains filled with raiders and beasts alike. Again, this comic is brutal, but nothing stayed stuck in my head more than the culture represented by the home of Essen. Halfway through this comic, Thea finds herself and her brother amidst a group of people mixed of all different tribes that, strangely, to her, are not at each other's throats with daggers. This place is one of peace and rebirth. Markings of tribe which appear on people's faces mean nothing here. All are one. All are brothers and sisters. And this does not sit well with Thea, of course, as she is stuck in the cycle of violence. The leader of this place, Mother Deidre, even spells this out when Thea lashes out saying, "You go to strike another, but wound yourself. This is how the cycle starts." It's a powerful line that you might read and then move on from, but as the comic continues, it will resonate with you much stronger. The way this clan handles the cycle of violence is baffling to Thea, so much so that she storms away, thinking them mad. I've chosen not to show you these pages where this is revealed because I was truly shocked when I saw them for the first time. It made me angry as well. It made me sad. It left me stunned at how foolish it felt, but also how right it was. Johnson was toying with my emotions, showing me something that sparked a fire inside my soul that cried out in injustice. But in my heart, I knew it was the path towards peace. Extremity ends on a polarizing note. Endless bloodshed, a mech versus a giant kaiju, and tragedy fill the pages. The final chapter to this comic does not give you an answer as to who is right and who is wrong, or even how this world concludes. Instead, it gives you all the emotional beats of characters who are suffering under the weight of the cycle of violence. A cycle that can only win when hatred and revenge are put aside to forge a new path. It's not for Johnson to tell us if this is possible or not, but rather it's up to us, the reader, to look inside our own selves and ask the question, can we put aside hate and show others love? Looking back at people's reactions to Extremity's ending, I can see why some were left unfulfilled. Stories these days have definitive endings, and that's not wrong. A nice bow to wrap everything up neatly is always a treat, but Daniel Warren Johnson is not interested in closure. He's interested in making us feel and think beyond our original understanding. Extremity, for me, has a beautiful ending, as I will always prefer a final chapter that asks of you rather than closes the book entirely. B tier is also my score for this title, but it is higher up than Space Mullet. I highly suggest you grab this comic if you're able to stomach the brutality on the pages. There were 2 trade paperbacks at one point, but they're out of print. Luckily, Image Comics recently re-released the series in a beautiful hardcover format that is readily available and features some behind-the-scenes articles. Additionally, I'd also like to mention that this is the first series that got me hooked on collecting single-issue comics as a way to display an artist's work. I was able to find all 12 issues during the recording of this video, and I now proudly display them for all to see in my office. But Daniel Warren Johnson was not done writing comic books after his blood-soaked tale of Thea. and you'd be right to think that his next comic would be even more vitriol given its name. But surprisingly, the next title in line is a story about acceptance, love, and letting go. Let's take a look at Murder Falcon. In my opinion, Murder Falcon is where some of the most recognizable aspects of Daniel Warren Johnson's works come to light. Previous comics did not lack heart in any way, but here we see some of the trademarks of his stories start to take form. Murder Falcon follows Jake, a down-on-his-luck musician who's put down his electric guitar. Throughout the story, we learn as to why he left his musical career behind, and while that is central to the story, we cannot skim over the fact that there is a bird, man, machine hybrid that shows up to steal the show. This is Murder Falcon, or Murph as he's called. In the world of Murder Falcon, everything's wild. As we've come to expect from Daniel Warren Johnson at this point, there's kaiju running around wild, and people fear for their lives. Jake struggles with severe anxiety, not just over the monsters afoot, but also from his past life as a musician. You see, this book, while on the surface is about battling monsters with sick guitar riffs and heavy metal music, is really about conquering anxiety and the fear of the unknown. Murder Falcon is obviously very special to me, as it's one of the only other Johnson comics I've ever covered here on the channel. But even more so, I wanted to take a moment to talk to someone else about this comic and their personal story with it. So I sat down with Bunkmaster B to chat about this comic. When you first read Murder Falcon from Daniel Warren Johnson, did it connect with you in a strong way? Did it feel like something more than just your average comic book, or was it just that to you?
I probably wouldn't be someone sitting here talking with you if this book did not hit me as something more than just your run-of-the-mill comic book. Absolutely runs every chance of being that. It's a book with a, admittedly like stupid title of Murder Falcon. When Daniel Warren Johnson chose that, I think he had to know going into it that that's not a high literature thing. It's about heavy metal, which is a fairly niche hobby, and fighting giant monsters. Like with a lesser execution, this book is just like big stupid energy, and I'm there for that version of the book. But there's so much more going to it than that. There's a lot of very heavy themes that are put into this. And in the introduction, DWJ talks about how this book is about sort of when you're going through that personal storm, when it feels like everything is pushing down on you and nothing that you do is going to be good enough, and it's hard to find the joy anymore, and all you want to do is give up. How the right thing to do is finding the joy, finding the love from the people around you to keep pushing through and not push away. And there's so many parallels that I go through there. Both me personally with some of the darker times, and all I want to do is self-close in and push everyone away, with some different family members that are particularly close to me that have had similar things going through with this book and have being on the sort of the outside looking in. There's so much that's going on here. And the thing that this book never forgets is the heart that beats through all of that. Whether it's the characters there to support one another, whether it's the tender moments in between the big fights, this is a book filled with heart in a way that you would not expect a book about a heavy metal Falcon with a machine arm drinking Bud Light, or sorry, Spud Light, hanging out with his friends would be.
Murder Falcon is the comic I always recommend to people who have read Transformers and want more action from Daniel Warren Johnson. It's a wonderful title to introduce people to some of the deeper and more meaningful stories within Johnson's catalog. It does such a great job of keeping you along for the ride and the experience of visceral action and kick-ass art. By the end of the comic, Johnson pulls the rug out from under your feet and hits you right over the head with a powerful, long-lasting message about learning to put your strength in those around you. Murder Falcon is going in the S tier. As for collecting, there is a beautiful hardcover format book that is currently available for this title. As per usual with Johnson's works, this book also collects some early concept designs for the characters in the last few pages. As with all these comics, you could read them digitally, yes, but I would highly recommend grabbing a copy of the book itself so you can lay the pages out flat and fully immerse yourself in the story and the world. After Murder Falcon, Daniel Warren Johnson took some time to write for both DC and Marvel, starting with Wonder Woman: Dead Earth. As a quick disclaimer, I'm not super familiar with the world and characters from DC Comics. I've seen some movies, played some games, and have a general knowledge of these characters, but if I miss something about the character themselves here that is not spelled out in the comic itself, then please forgive me. After all, we're reviewing Daniel Warren Johnson's work, not an extended universe outside of this title. Wonder Woman: Dead Earth follows, Wonder Woman in a post-apocalyptic Earth as she attempts to regain humanity's trust in battling against grotesque creatures that come about due to a nuclear war. This comic acts almost as a mystery story in some senses, as Wonder Woman, or Diana, is trying to navigate the dead Earth as well as recover her memories for how she got where she was. Humanity is completely destroyed, and those that survived belong to clans that oppress the weak. Diana is often faced with the fact that when she was a child, she was told by her mother not to trust humanity, as they would always let her down. Even now, at the end of the world, she chooses to trust in the humans, trying to fix the broken world they share. There's plenty of amazing moments in this series as Diana recovers her past as well as forges new paths with herself with relics from the old world, such as Batman's utility belt and even using Superman's spine as a weapon. Ultimately, this story is about accepting the consequences for our own mistakes and choosing to tread on through hell. The story ends at somewhat of a cliffhanger, but unlike Extremity, there is more closure for the characters on the page. Dead Earth reminds me quite a bit of Extremity actually, as they both share a bloody and rage-fueled story. While Extremity does have some more original ideas to it, Dead Earth, to me, feels almost like a refinement of the style. It's a shorter story, and I think that's for the best. It does not overstay its welcome, and it gets right to the point. It's not as impactful in my mind as Extremity in the story department. However, overall, I feel that it's slightly curated a little bit better. I'm sure if I was a bigger DC fan, there would be a lot more here for me to say. But even then, as a casual superhero enjoyer, Daniel Warren Johnson still does an amazing job of using easily recognizable ideas and imagery to get even people like myself invested in the world. For me, this doesn't really feel like a DC world story the same way something like one of the movies would, but rather a story that features some characters and ideas from that franchise. I loved learning about Diana's past, how she came to be, and her mother's pure tenacity to keep her home afloat. And of course, the action scenes are badass as always. Seeing Wonder Woman absolutely rip and tear through some monsters is such a treat, and Daniel Warren Johnson shows off the speed and mobility of these characters perfectly, as he always does. Wonder Woman: Dead Earth is going at the top of B tier for me. This is a great read, which you can accomplish with the currently available large format hardcover of this book. Now, some of you will probably be upset about this next statement solely because you belong to the never-ending Marvel vs. DC war, something that, once again, I have very little knowledge of. But Daniel Warren Johnson's next comic is a tremendous step up from Dead Earth. Beta Ray Bill is like a horse guy or something. I don't really know. And Daniel Warren Johnson knows that. He's very much aware that people like myself have not been keeping up with the Thor comics and might be severely confused as to who is who here. Sprinkled throughout the comics are little footnotes that inform the reader where they can learn more about these characters from the Thor comics, which is a nice addition. All that being said, as someone who knows nothing about Thor other than some basics I learned from the movies, this comic really hit me hard. Argent Star follows Beta Ray Bill after he has lost his legendary weapon, Stormbringer, and is constantly being one-upped by the legendary god of thunder himself, Thor. Bill is a horse guy who desperately misses his old life. He feels like he is nothing now following his loss of power. He feels slighted by Odin for not taking care of him like he does Thor. He feels like a freak because his lover, Lady Sif, only wants to be intimate with him when he changes his form back to his original self, something he can no longer do without Stormbringer. This page alone really hits hard. Because of these issues, Bill embarks on a journey with a wild cast of characters in order to kill Surtur, the god of the underworld, in order to regain his lost power. This comic has spaceship battles, a retired Odin who owns a bar, a cameo from Murph, and so much more. It's a wonderfully short story that keeps the reader guessing as to what's coming next, and it is ultimately about self-acceptance. Bill is struggling to accept who he is in so many ways, but ultimately, he's struggling with the fact that he is not Thor. He's not conventionally attractive, he's not all-powerful, he hates himself, and will go to the literal ends of the world to change it. By the end of the story, Bill does get what he wants, but it's not enough. As it turns out, what he thought he wanted is really not what he needed. It might be cliche to say, but what Bill needed all along was not power or charming looks. He just needed to accept that those on his journey already loved him for who he was. Another character even says to him near the end of the story that he is radiant. He is exactly who he needs to be. Bill realizes this, albeit late, and is left with the weight of his actions. He gets what he wants, not exactly what he needs. It's a beautifully tragic story about self-acceptance. Argent Star is available in trade paperback format and was recently reprinted by the publisher. This comic sits proudly in the A tier for me, as this title proves that even when working with another company's IP, Daniel Warren Johnson is at the top of his game. And speaking of top of his game, we're going deep into the wrestling world. Do a Powerbomb. Keeping in theme with our last comic, I know absolutely nothing about the world this title is set in. Wrestling is not something that I grew up with, and so I never really gave it any of my own time to appreciate. By the time I read this comic, I had already started Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, and so I was more aware of wrestling moves overall, but the majority of my insight came from my wife. You see, my wife grew up on wrestling, and so it was a unique experience for us both while I read through this story. She's not into comics at all, sadly. However, I'm constantly showing her pages of moments from these different books in an attempt to gain her approval and even her interest. While ultimately she still doesn't have much interest in these, she has expressed somewhat of a small liking to the idea of Do a Powerbomb, as it does fit within a world she already knows very well. I often turn the page of the comic and ask her, "What is this move called?" only for her to happily answer me. Do a Powerbomb is about loss, and wrestling, obviously. As with all Daniel Warren Johnson titles, the focus of the comic may seem action-oriented at first, but there is always a heart to the story buried deep. Lona Steel Rose is an amateur wrestler who is trying to climb up the professional wrestling ladder. I realize this might be a pun as ladders are used in wrestling, but again, my lack of knowledge must be pointed out here, and what I'm trying to say is she's literally trying to book bigger jobs. At the start of the comic, Lona is a child, watching her mother wrestle on the big stage, until one fateful night, her opponent, Cobra-san, performs a move incorrectly, costing Lona's mother her life. It's a brutal start to this comic, showing the reader that wrestling is indeed extremely dangerous. As a quick note, personally, for the majority of my life, I always viewed wrestling as fake. This is quite common from people who really don't interact with this world, but thankfully, my mind has been opened. Wrestling is not fake. It is a performance, and the performers are athletes. What people most likely mean when they use the word fake is staged. Storylines, moves, speeches, and more are for the most part prepared beforehand so that the show runs smoothly. But that doesn't mean the performers on stage are not highly trained experts, putting their backs into everything they do. Blood, sweat, and tears are just the beginning as these athletes give their lives for the show. This is where Lona struggles. After the tragic death of her mother, she's placed herself in a very violent corner of the wrestling world. She loves the show, just as her mother did, but she is angry and uses the ring as a place to let her rage out, much to the dismay of her father. As the story continues, Lona is met by a necromancer who invites her to the universe's most brutal wrestling championship filled with fighters from across worlds and times. The prize for winning? To bring back one life from beyond the grave. With this knowledge, Lona joins the championship with a reluctant tag team partner, Cobra-san, the man who was responsible for her mother's accidental death. A very important note here is that as these two begin their journey in the tournament, they realize that every world beyond theirs has wrestling, but Earth is the only destination wherein the wrestling is predetermined. Everywhere else in this universe, and more importantly in this championship, losing a wrestling match means death. I always try my hardest to keep these videos spoiler free because I want to encourage my viewers to actually read the comics on display. But for this video, I have to venture into spoilers to get my points across. If you have any faith in my recommendations when it comes to comics, then please pause this video, go read Do a Powerbomb, and then return. If not, and you are fine hearing about the ending through me, then that's okay. But I will be severely disappointed in you. In this comic, Lona and Cobra-san learn to trust each other more and more through the championship before their relationship is suddenly halted by the reveal that Cobra-san is actually Lona's father. This is a story aspect that is revealed to the reader quite early on in the book, but for Lona, it is a heartbreaking reveal. She has hated this man for her whole life for killing her mother, but now she's started to grow past this hate and created a friendship with him, only to discover that he has been her father, who she also has a troubled relationship with. Anger, grief, regret, and confusion all cloud Lona's mind as the two try to mend their broken relationship. No wonder her father was so dismissive of her wrestling. He did not want to see her get hurt like her mother did. The emotional weight on Cobra-san too must not be understated. After causing his own wife's death in the ring, he decided to keep his identity hidden from his daughter to protect her, and yet he has failed. Here they are in the depths of hell, fighting magical creatures and insane wrestlers for the chance to revive their lost loved one. Both characters are struggling to accept their circumstances, but they must work together despite their troubled history. The finale of this comic is as action-packed and bloodied as every other chapter, but the stakes have been raised eternally. The final contestant Lona and her father must face is God. That's right. At the end of the line at the doorsteps of heaven, God comes out to wrestle. And he is magnificent. The fight on display here is Daniel Warren Johnson's greatest work in my opinion. The glory of this majestic wrestler versus these two scrappy heroes is righteous, and the battle happening in the ring is just glorious. Blow after blow is landed against God, and they do nothing. The Almighty is impenetrable, insurmountable, immortal. Through sheer willpower and rage, though, blood is drawn eventually, and God is impressed. No one has ever shown such strength against him. It's at this point that you get a spark of hope in your soul, realizing that this is possible. Lona and Cobra Sun might actually defeat God in a wrestling tournament. But that hope is quickly squashed when God puts these two mortals in their place. The tournament is over, and God is the winner. But Lona's determination has proven inspirational and commendable, as God offers her one prize as consolation. Lona asks for what she wants, the return of her mother, and God denies her this. He will not bring her mother back from the dead. That's not how life works. We live, we love, and we die. There is no escaping the march of time, our inevitable end. We all must pass on at some point. Lona is crushed. She has journeyed through hell and has nothing to show for it. In return, though, God gifts Lona with the power of memory. Her mother is physically gone, but she lives on in memory, and now that Lona has completed her journey, she can let go of her hatred and her sorrow and remember her mother as she was. A beautiful wrestler and an amazing mother. This ending falls in line with Daniel Warren Johnson's other stories, as characters often do not get what they want, but rather what they truly needed all along despite their own goals. It would have been easy to have Lona's mom return from the dead and everyone live happily ever after, but as in real life, that's not how things work. Sure, this comic isn't concerned with reality, as Lona and Cobra Sun have to fight wrestlers from other worlds, but still, people do not come back from the dead. God himself will not break the rules of life, but he will gift our hero with memory. Lona's mother lives on, in memory and in the crowd. Do a Powerbomb sits in the S tier. This book won Johnson his first Eisner Award for Best Teens Graphic Novel, but I firmly believe this is a title that every comic book fan should own. Currently, the best way to do that is via the trade paperback, which is readily available online and in comic book shops. I asked Daniel Warren Johnson on one of his live streams if this comic would be getting a deluxe hardcover edition, and he said he wasn't quite sure as the publisher, Image Comics, was still selling the paperback like hotcakes, and therefore they didn't want to interrupt sales with another SKU. Image, if you're listening to this, please make a deluxe edition, just like you did for Murder Falcon and Extremity. I need it. I will buy every single copy if that's what it takes. Hey, Delta from the future here real quick. There actually is a hardcover format of Do a Powerbomb, but it's only in French, so that's why it wasn't included originally. And, something like that is going to be way too expensive to import. There's no way I'm going to buy... Surely, there's no way Daniel Warren Johnson could keep this winning streak up. What on earth could he be cooking up next? Ah, nothing. Nothing much, just a little thing called Transformers. You might think this would be the longest section of the video, as this is Daniel Warren Johnson's largest comic to date, spanning 24 issues. Well, sadly, this is actually going to be one of the shortest sections of the video for two reasons. Number one, at the time of writing and recording this video, Daniel Warren Johnson's run of Transformers has not yet concluded. We just got issue number 22 in, and so I cannot accurately rate this entire series as I have other comics in the video. Reason number two is I want to save the majority of my energy speaking on Transformers for an upcoming video where I and some other creators will be looking back retrospectively at Daniel Warren Johnson's 2-year run with the franchise. That video, whenever it's ready, will be the more comprehensive breakdown of the series you're looking for. All of that being said, I'm still going to prematurely rank this comic and speak on it. Transformers is going at the top of A tier. What? Why not S tier? Delta, are you crazy? Well, again, this comic is not fully done yet, and this arbitrary list of mine is fluid as titles can shift and move over time. It is absolutely possible that the final 2 issues of Transformers push this series up into the S category, but I highly doubt they would move it above do a Powerbomb for myself. Transformers Skybound, as we call it in the community, has been the greatest Transformers comic of all time, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased, as my channel focuses on it, but I truly believe it is at the center of the franchise currently. Some have argued it is too dark and gloomy, but as I've said in other videos before, there is an underlining heart to this story that hits you hard, just as most Daniel Warren Johnson titles do. This comic is not for everyone. If you're tired of the Generation 1 aesthetic or want a more expansive world like we got in the IDW comics, you will be disappointed. And that's perfectly okay if this isn't your cup of tea, but the story on display here is top-notch. I will say that this narrative is within the top 3 stories of all times for the franchise. And no, I'm not going to tell you what the other 2 are. I don't want to start a fight. At least not yet. If you're watching this before my Skybound retrospective has been released, then just watch any of my other various Skybound videos on the channel. Even when I have criticized this title in the past, you can still hear me praise it for its accomplishments. But since I'm a cop-out, let's hear from some other creators about what they think on this series as a whole.
Even if, for some inexplicable reason, Daniel Warren Johnson does not stick the landing for his run on Transformers, there is no way it won't go down as one of my top Transformers runs of all time, based purely on the strength of what we've gotten so far. I'm the sort of Transformers fan who enjoys adherence to classic G1 elements, but I also enjoy when creators take a swing and try new things. I like both approaches, and I think Skybound's Transformers series strikes a great balance between the old and the new. From the incredibly well-defined and compelling characters to the familiar G1 components used in some surprising ways, the book scratches an itch I didn't even know I had. The first 6 issues written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson are, in my opinion, a high water mark that stands among the best published Transformers comics, and I think it's something that will never be replicated. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime set of issues. And then we got another legendary crop of issues when Jorge Corona takes over the art duties, who has become one of my favorite Transformers artists. With both of these guys, the pure, unadulterated energy and sense of fun in the layouts and the figure work is just off the charts. It's absolutely bonkers. And it's all cranked up to maximum with Mike Spicer's loud color palettes. The combination of the off-the-wall energy and action sequences with some hard-hitting emotional beats is something really unique among Transformers comics, and I'd be so bold as to say we've never gotten this particular mix of action and heart in past series. Not to this degree. Transformers may not top some of my favorite creator-owned work by Daniel Warren Johnson, but I can confidently say that it's been one of my favorite runs on Transformers comics ever, and certainly one that has kept me engaged and excited on the month-to-month basis at a level for Transformers comics that I haven't experienced in over a decade. I really treasure this series, and I can't wait to see how Daniel Warren Johnson wraps up his run.
What does Skybound mean to me? If I could sum up what these comics mean to me in one word, it would be gateway. As I feel like for a lot of people, and especially myself included, these comics have been such a great story to get into and a great gateway to Transformers comics, because I feel like Transformers comics before Skybound were niche and for sure had a core fan base, but was never near this popular with the Energon universe. And I think that's a great thing overall, especially for people like me who have barely read any of the other Transformers comics. But now with the Energon universe, I have been going back and reading older comics from IDW, Dreamwave, and the Marvel comics. And it's amazing discovering these older comics, and it's even more awesome that Image is bringing back those older Marvel comics for people to read. And I know eventually they'll do the other comics from like IDW and Dreamwave, but it's just really cool to just read a story like the Energon universe, and why it means so much to me, as Generation 1 was one of the first Transformers media that I was exposed to, and reading a comic in the modern day based on these designs and characters and just how much emotion these characters have is just really, really amazing. And having a Transformers story that's this rich with its storytelling, character development, and just how much emotion goes into this story is just really, really good. And I feel like that's what makes it so appealing for people to read and pick up, and why it's also very easy for people to get into the story, as there's only one real Transformer story at a time each month from Image Comics. So it is really easy to just pick up and read, and which is why I think it's a great gateway to getting into other Transformers comics, like I've mentioned with Dreamwave and Marvel and IDW. And I know there are other stories with G.I. Joe, with Void Rivals, but honestly, if you are just a Transformers fan, you could really just pick up and read issue 1 to where we are at right now, due to it only having one story being told each month as it comes out, which is great because a lot of other comics will have stories intertwined with each other, will have crossovers, and I know eventually Image will do that for Transformers, but right now it's kind of easy for someone to say, okay, this comes out next month, I can read this issue, okay, and I can go back and read this issue if I forget something. It's really easy to just pick up and read, and not even a sense of it being casual, because it is a casual read, but that doesn't take away the emotion and rich writing this story has. And I really do hope the Energon universe goes on and on for many years to come, but these just mean so much to me because of how much of a gateway it is for Transformers comics readers to actually just read the comics and explore the other universes. I know I'm not the only one who, when this story came out, there was a lot of people starting to really get into Transformers comics. And so that's why Skybound and its Energon universe means very much to me, and giving me a new interest in this awesome fandom.
As for collecting, Transformers Skybound is a huge seller in comic book shops right now, and so there's multiple ways to take on the story. Single issues are still being sold in stores, although other than issue 1 and more recent issues, it might be a little hard to grab the middle-of-the-road storylines. I highly suggest getting the trade paperback volumes to get started. Each volume collects 6 issues, meaning there are 4 total volumes collecting Daniel Warren Johnson's storyline. Further than that though, if you are willing to spend a little extra, then you have to get the deluxe hardcover editions, which collects issues in sets of 12. Book 1 has been released, and it's immaculate. If you'd like to know more, then I even have a review on this channel covering it. So, Transformers is technically the most recent comic to end on this list, but I've chosen to leave it as the penultimate ranking because there is one more that we must cover. One that I honestly was not a huge fan of at first, but upon completing it, has made me return to my tier list and question the placement of every single title that Daniel Warren Johnson has released. We need to talk about The Moon is Following Us. The Moon is Following Us is Daniel Warren Johnson's strangest comic of all time, and the best way I can explain this is through my own experience. I started reading this series as it was being released, and I struggled with it personally as a monthly released series. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that I feel like Daniel Warren Johnson's stories work best when read in totality, with perhaps the exception of Space Mullet, simply because it is written as more of an anthology series. There's nothing wrong with reading Johnson's work as they release. After all, that's what I've been doing with Transformers. But for the most part, his stories are best read when they can be done so in one sitting, or at least two with The Moon is Following Us, given it's been released as 2 volumes. Again, Image, please do a hardcover deluxe. This comic follows 2 parents, Sam and Duncan, as they try to rescue their daughter Penny from the forces of evil known as the Cascade. It's a mix of science fiction and fantasy with a wonderful cast of characters, like an armed-to-the-teeth frog who happens to drive a red Volkswagen Beetle. The big twist to this series is shown off on the final pages of issue number 1, and further explained in issue 2, where we learn that this magical world is all inside of Penny's head. Sam and Duncan wake up one morning to find their daughter in a coma, and nothing will wake her up. So they embark on a journey into their daughter's mind to save her from evil forces attempting to keep her in a deep slumber forever. This is why the world is so fantastical. The frog, castles, dragons, unicorns, a big bat with wings who sells them weapons. It's all from Penny's imagination. Now you may notice something here. The pages of Sam and Duncan in Penny's mind look different. They don't match Johnson's regular art style. They're almost smoother and a little more cartoony. And you're right, because for this title, Daniel Warren Johnson has teamed up with artist Riley Rossmo, who draws the scenes taking place in Penny's mind. You might be thinking, Delta, that means that this comic is not eligible for this video, since you stated at the start you would only be ranking comics that Daniel Warren Johnson writes and draws. And even further, with that logic, you have to take Transformers out of the running because artist Jorge Corona took over art duties in issue number 7. And to all of that I say, no. It's my video, so I make the rules. Issues 1 through 5 of The Moon is Following Us are really good. But after I read them, I made the difficult decision to stop reading until the story was completed. I felt almost as if I was falling away from the story as it was evolving, and once again, in regular Daniel Warren Johnson fashion, I knew having the whole picture together would make for an even better read. And sure enough, I was right. Later on in the comic around issue 7 is a reveal that is genuinely gut-wrenching, and I was not prepared for it. While this comic is about what parents would do in order to save their children, it's also about being an adult and learning to work through your personal trauma, whether it be the death of a parental figure or even the betrayal of a family member. I don't want to get too far into the story because I really don't want to spoil it, but the world on display here is wonderful, as in Volume 2, Sam and Duncan meet Penny's nightmares, who aid them in battle. These nightmares act as Penny's last line of defense against the Cascade, as their job is not necessarily to scare Penny, but to make her stronger. There's a huge caveat here, though, I need to discuss, and it's not on part of the comic, but it's in fact on me. The Moon is Following Us is about parenthood, and I am not yet a parent. I completely understand the beating heart of this comic is speaking to those who would also travel through hell for their children. This is a concept that I can sympathize with, but I cannot yet empathize with, given, again, I don't have any children of my own. And no, my dogs don't count. I would kill for them, but it's different. Oh, no, let's not do that. This comic feels like Daniel Warren Johnson's most personal story yet. Because of all of these aspects, I felt I should speak to someone who is not only a parent, but who is deeply moved by this comic. What was your kind of feeling as the comic was rolling out with this story?
When the first issue came out, that final reveal and at the end of it, at the end of that first issue, it becomes crystal clear as to what they're doing and the struggle that they're facing with Penny, and it's like every parent's nightmare, like something would happen to your kid, and it's a thing that you can't dwell on it too much, because if you do, it's somewhat crippling when you think like, oh my gosh, if something happened to my child, like what would I do? And then it's like, well, that's don't even think about that because that's just it's too painful to even think about. So in seeing that is what they're facing, I was instantly hooked. The first issue, I would say, it doesn't it moves, but you don't really get a full scope of what's happening until after the first two issues. The reveal that the protectors inside of Penny's mind are her toys, and that just what her dreams are coming to life, and it's what her thoughts are fueling this world, and that really kind of grabbed me as well. So this is the first time when I read a comic where I actually was moved to tears in reading the comic. There has been many stories that I've read that have been, have hit home emotionally and have resonated with me. But this was the first time where, having it be so strongly connected to parental love, parental choices. It's the first time where something has spoke to me on that level where it hit me, and multiple times. Like when I first read it, I teared up, I cried, and then on multiple read throughs, I've done the same. I was explaining to my wife about the story, and in the explanation of the story, I started crying. It's just, I mean, that's never happened to me before, and yeah, it is a love letter to a parent's love for their child. Even if you don't have kids, you know what it's like to have parents. You know what it feels like to love. That's not a foreign concept. It could hit you on an emotional level. But then if you go back, after you have children, so if you went back then and started reading the story again, it would land differently. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of Daniel Warren Johnson's stories. They're drawn from his life experiences, and the more that he lives, the more that he experiences, the more he has to say. I said that it's for everyone, but to introduce someone to the world of comics that has kids, it's a great example of what a comic can be. There's so many times where people have this concept of what comic books are, and it's spandex, it's superheroes, it's all of that. But comics are so much more, and the more that that I, as I get older, I want different things from my comic books. What we as parents, what we bring to the table, what we, how we shape our child's lives, and that's a big part of the story too. What any kind of trauma or emotional baggage that we bring as parents in raising our child, like how we can influence and impact them, but also in return, when we are at our weakest, we can look to our children, and when we maybe not, might not think that as much, but that we draw strength from them, and it's just the whole. It encompasses what parenthood is about just so beautifully, and that's what I think some of the things that might not hit with someone who doesn't have children. There's just some things that you'll just get more out of it in the long run.
I'm going to keep it very straight here. The Moon is Following Us belongs in the S tier, and it might even be better than Do a Powerbomb. However, because this comic book does not speak to me as personally as it can since I'm not a parent, I'm placing it just a little bit lower. This comic is the crowning achievement of Daniel Warren Johnson's work, in my opinion. It is the culmination of all his other titles, and it's truly a masterpiece alongside Do a Powerbomb. When I am finally a parent, I wholeheartedly believe that The Moon is Following Us will slide its way past Do a Powerbomb into the top ranking. At the time of this recording, you can purchase Volume 1 of The Moon is Following Us, which collects the first 5 issues, while Volume 2 is yet to have a release date, but it is coming. And as I said before, I really do hope this title gets a hardcover deluxe edition, as well as all of Daniel Warren Johnson's comics should receive. Daniel Warren Johnson changed my life. That sounds a little pretentious probably, but it's true. It is through his work on Transformers that I not only created this channel, but also fell in love with comics as a whole. Friends like Carl and Bunkmaster B, I only know because of the wonderful stories that connect us all. Johnson also seems like a really awesome guy. I don't know him personally, but I always watch his Friday live streams, and it's always a wonderful time. He's even answered a few of my questions from time to time, giving me some further insight into his work ethics and his style. If you do want to know more about him as a person, I've linked a great interview with him in the description below. Now, my list is fluid, and it's always shifting as I read certain titles and as my own life shifts and changes. Daniel Warren Johnson's run on Transformers is coming to an end, and it will most certainly be moving up into the S tier. I'm also eagerly awaiting news on his next comic, which we know will be set in an original sci-fi world. Who knows? Maybe Murph and Jonah will make a cameo. Perhaps we'll see the return of some ideas from Extremity work their way into the story. All I know is that when Daniel Warren Johnson is behind a comic in any shape or form, it's going to be well worth my time and hard-earned money. Thank you, Daniel Warren Johnson, for all the amazing stories you have given us, and for all the wonderful worlds you've yet to introduce us to. It is true that at the center of all your stories is action and a beating heart that we can all connect to. Wait, what? You're still here? No, the video's over. I did it. I ranked every Daniel Warren Johnson comic, well, almost every Daniel Warren Johnson comic that I had available to me. Well, I guess since you're still here, there is one Daniel Warren Johnson mini comic that really sticks with me. This comic was released on November 2nd, 2012 at 12:44 p.m. See, this is a comic that was originally written in March of that year by Daniel Warren Johnson for his wedding. This comic is really special to me. I can't fully relate to The Moon is Following Us yet on a fundamental level because I don't have children, but a comic like this about marriage and about all the different scales that you have to pull off and work with, as the story tells us, when it comes to being in a relationship with somebody, is really important to me. It's also really important because as a child I did read Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And so especially this spot right here, where we see Daniel and his wife Rachel going through life, really means a whole lot to me. And of course, this last image here on the comic is just so Daniel Warren Johnson. Again, I'm not going to rank this one, but if I had to, I probably would put it at the very top, as cliche and eye-rolling as that may be. This is a comic that I really don't think you should miss, so go onto his blog, scroll back, turn the clock back, and take a look at Daniel Warren Johnson when he first started creating his comics. See ya.